At the hospital, my daughter-in-law looked straight at the nurse and said, "She's not family," as if the woman who had carried Michael Whitaker through fever, heartbreak, school plays, and every hard mile of his life had suddenly become a stranger in a beige cardigan. I was standing at the front desk of Mercy General with my purse tucked under one arm and my son's old navy sweater folded against my chest, the one he used to wear during football season when he was 17 and still called me first whenever the world felt too large. The nurse had only asked a simple question. Relationship to the patient. And I had answered the way I had answered for 42 years. I'm his mother. That was when Claire stepped forward from the waiting area, her cream-colored coat still buttoned, her blonde hair pinned neatly at the back of her head, her voice low enough to sound polite but clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. She's not family. Please don't release any information to her. The nurse paused with her fingers over the keyboard. A man by the vending machines turned his head. Somewhere behind the double doors, a monitor beeped in a steady rhythm, and I remember thinking how strange it was that machines could keep time while people forgot history. I did not raise my voice. I did not plead. I simply looked at Claire, then at the small plastic sign on the desk that read Family Waiting Area Check-in, and for the first time in my life, I understood how a person could be erased without anyone touching her. I had received the call at 2:17 that afternoon. Unknown number. A calm hospital voice asking if I knew a Michael Whitaker. My son had been brought in after a highway accident outside Fairfax, conscious but under observation, they said. I had not asked whether Claire was there. I had only grabbed my keys, his sweater from the hall closet, and the little framed photo I kept on the console table, Michael at 10 years old with both front teeth missing, grinning beside his late father Robert at Lake Anna. It took me 34 minutes to drive to the hospital. I remember every red light. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I remember whispering, "Please let him be all right," not dramatically, not loudly, just the way mothers pray when there is no one else in the car to hear them. When I arrived, Claire was already there. Of course she was. She always arrived early when there was a place to control, a room to arrange, a story to manage. She did not look relieved to see me. She looked interrupted. "Eleanor," she said, as if my name were an inconvenience she had found on the bottom of her shoe. "You shouldn't have come all this way." All this way. 22 miles from my small ranch house in Arlington to the hospital where my only child was lying behind doors I was not allowed to enter. I tried to smile because that is what women my age are trained to do when pain walks into the room wearing perfume. "He's my son, Claire." She tilted her head, almost kindly. "Michael doesn't need stress right now." I knew then that she meant me. Not the accident. Not the hospital. Not the uncertainty hanging over every chair in that waiting room. Me. I was the stress. I was the problem to be managed. The nurse cleared her throat and asked if I had identification. I opened my wallet with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. Before I could slide my driver's license across the counter, Claire placed one manicured hand lightly on the desk and said the words that made the air go cold. "She's not family." I heard them. I understood them. I did not move. I only folded Michael's sweater once, then again, pressing the worn cotton flat against my palm, because my hands needed something to do besides remember holding him when he was small. The nurse did not argue with Claire. She only glanced between us, trained by years of hospital rules to recognize conflict before it became loud. "Ma'am," she said gently, looking at me now instead of Claire, "you are welcome to wait in the general seating area until we can confirm the patient's approved contacts." Approved contacts. The words were clean and professional, but they landed like a door closing. Claire gave the nurse a grateful little smile, the kind women use at charity luncheons when someone refills their tea. Then she turned to me. "This is not personal, Eleanor. We just have to protect Michael's peace." His peace. I looked down at the sweater in my arms and remembered a winter night when Michael was 8, burning with a fever of 104 degrees, his small hand locked around two of my fingers while Robert drove us through sleet to the emergency room. Back then, no one had asked whether I was family. No one had questioned the woman holding the sick child. I walked to the row of gray plastic chairs beneath the television mounted high in the corner. The volume was muted. Closed captions rolled beneath a morning show rerun, bright people smiling about recipes and weekend plans while my life had narrowed to a hallway and a set of double doors. I sat with my purse on my lap and Michael's sweater beside me, folded too neatly, as if neatness could keep me from falling apart. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant, coffee, and rain on wool coats. A little boy across from me leaned against his father's shoulder. An older couple whispered over a clipboard. A young woman in scrubs walked past carrying a paper cup of ice. Everything moved with purpose. Everyone seemed to belong to someone. Claire stood near the nurse's station, speaking softly into her phone. I could hear pieces of it, because people who want to sound calm often forget that calm carries. "Yes, I am handling it," she said. "No, she showed up anyway. I told them not to give her anything." She paused, then lowered her voice further. "She gets confused when things are stressful." I stared at the floor tiles. White, gray, white, gray. A pattern someone had chosen because it was practical and easy to clean. I wondered if Claire had practiced that sentence before. She gets confused. It was such a tidy way to ruin an old woman. Not cruel enough to sound cruel. Not false enough for strangers to challenge. Just soft enough to make me seem unreliable. I reached for my phone and opened Michael's contact. My thumb hovered over his name, though I knew he would not answer. His photo filled the screen, taken last 4th of July at Claire's backyard barbecue. He had one arm around Grace and one around Claire, smiling toward the camera. I had taken that picture. I was not in it. I remembered Claire asking me to step back just a little so she could get better light. Just a little. That had always been her way. Not a shove. A step. Not a wall. A curtain. Not a command. A suggestion made in a sweet voice while everyone else was busy smiling. The double doors opened, and Claire disappeared through them after a nurse called her name. No one called mine. I watched the door swing shut behind her, smooth and silent, and I understood something that made my chest go still. Claire had not kept me away from Michael because of the accident. She had been keeping me away for years. The hospital had only given her a desk, a nurse, and the right words to make it official. Claire came back 12 minutes later with a paper bracelet looped around her wrist. It was pale blue, the color hospitals use when they want authority to look harmless. She saw me notice it and tucked her hand into her coat pocket, but not before I read the word printed in black across the band. Visitor. Such a simple word. Such a powerful one when someone else decides who gets to wear it. She walked over slowly, heels clicking softly against the polished floor, and sat 2 chairs away from me instead of beside me. "Michael is stable," she said, as if delivering a weather report. "The doctor wants him to rest, so I think it is best if you go home." My hand stayed folded over my purse. "Did he ask for me?" Claire looked toward the nurse's station. "Not at me. He is not really in a position to ask for anyone right now." That was not an answer. After 68 years of life, a woman learns the difference between an answer and a sentence placed in the way of one. I nodded once, not because I believed her, but because I wanted to watch what she did when I stopped pushing. Claire relaxed. Only a little, but enough. Her shoulders dropped. Her mouth softened into that polished expression she used when she thought she had handled something unpleasant without leaving fingerprints. "You have always cared about him," she added, almost kindly. "But sometimes caring means knowing when your presence is not helpful." There it was again. The careful knife wrapped in cotton. Not helpful. Too emotional. Confused under stress. Words that did not sound like insults until they were stacked high enough to become a wall. "I drove 22 miles because someone from this hospital called me," I said quietly. "They must have had my number for a reason." Claire's smile thinned. "Old records, probably. You know how hospitals are with outdated paperwork." Outdated. I looked at her then, really looked at her. The pearl earrings Robert and I had given her on her first Christmas with our family. The diamond anniversary band Michael had bought after I quietly paid down their second mortgage so he could afford it. The expensive coat she once said was a little too much, then wore to every important occasion afterward. Nothing about Claire was accidental. Not her clothes. Not her words. Not the way she placed herself between people and then claimed she was only trying to keep peace. A nurse named Abigail passed by with a tablet tucked against her side. Her badge swung from a blue lanyard, and for one brief second her eyes met mine. There was sympathy there. Not enough to break a rule, but enough to remind me I was still visible to someone. Claire noticed that too. "Nurse," she called softly. Abigail stopped. "Yes, Mrs. Whittaker." Claire stood. "Could you make a note that only I should be contacted for updates until Michael is able to speak for himself? His mother tends to become overwhelmed, and I would hate for the staff to be put in an uncomfortable position." I heard every word. I felt none of them at first. That is how humiliation sometimes works when it is done in public. The body protects itself by going still. Abigail hesitated. "We follow the patient's chart and hospital policy," she said carefully. Claire's smile returned, brighter this time. "Of course. I just want what is best for my husband." My husband. She leaned on those words with the confidence of a person who believed marriage had erased motherhood. I looked down at my left hand. My wedding ring from Robert was loose now, thinner against my finger than it had been when he slid it there 45 years ago. Robert used to say that family was not a line on paper. It was who showed up when showing up cost something. I had shown up through fevers, layoffs, broken pipes, college tuition, Grace's birth, Robert's final winter, and every Sunday dinner Claire slowly taught Michael to cancel. Yet here I was, reduced to a woman in a chair, waiting for permission to love my own son. Claire thanked Abigail and turned back to me. "Please do not make this harder than it needs to be." I almost laughed then. Not because it was funny, but because the shape of the truth had finally become clear. Claire was not afraid I would make a scene. She was afraid I would remember who I was. The word remember stayed with me while Claire stood there pretending to be reasonable. It settled under my ribs, quiet and heavy, and suddenly the hospital waiting room was no longer just a room. It became a screen where the last 7 years began playing back with a clarity I had spent too long avoiding. I remembered the first Sunday dinner Claire changed without telling me. I had made pot roast because Michael loved pot roast with carrots cut thick and potatoes browned at the edges. At 5 o'clock, I called to ask if they were running late, and Claire answered with music and laughter behind her. "Oh, Eleanor, I am so sorry. I thought Michael told you we were doing brunch with my parents today." Michael called later and sounded confused. I thought Claire handled that. That was the first sentence I should have kept. I thought Claire handled that. After that, there were more. Grace's 8th grade concert moved from Thursday to Wednesday, according to Claire, though the school calendar had never changed. Thanksgiving dinner, suddenly too crowded for my small kitchen, hosted at Claire's sister's house instead. Christmas photos where I was asked to take the picture, then told there would be a family one later, except later never came. Each time, Claire gave me a soft excuse and a gentle smile. Each time, Michael looked tired, apologetic, and busy. Each time, I swallowed the hurt because I did not want to be the old woman who made things difficult. That is how people like Claire work. They do not remove you all at once. They move you 3 inches at a time until one day you are standing outside the circle, wondering when the music stopped including you. I remembered the summer Grace stayed with me for 6 weeks while Claire went to a wellness retreat in Arizona and Michael worked long days trying to keep his construction business afloat. Grace had been 9 then, all knees and freckles, leaving library books on my couch and asking for pancakes shaped like stars. I bought her school clothes that August. I paid for her dance lessons that fall. Claire thanked me in private, then told her friends at a Labor Day barbecue that she and Michael were raising Grace without much help. I had been standing at the lemonade pitcher when she said it. I remember the ice cracking inside the glass. I remember saying nothing. Then there was the second mortgage. Michael never asked me directly. He had too much of his father's pride for that. But I knew the look of a man doing math at the dinner table instead of tasting his food. Robert had been gone 3 years by then, and the life insurance money sat in an account I rarely touched. I wrote Michael a check large enough to let him breathe again. Claire cried when she hugged me. Real tears, I thought at the time. A week later, she posted a photo of her new kitchen backsplash and wrote, "Proud of what hard work can build." Hard work. I pressed my lips together in that hospital chair and looked at the woman who had learned to spend my kindness while hiding my name. Across the room, Claire was still speaking to Abigail, still using that careful voice, still building her little paper fence around Michael's room. I wanted to interrupt. I wanted to say, ask her who paid for the hospital plan. Ask her who sat with Grace during the pneumonia winter. Ask her who answered the phone every time Michael's life became too heavy for him to carry alone. But I did not speak. Not yet. I had learned something from Robert during his last months, when pain made him quiet but never careless. "Eleanor," he told me one evening, his hand resting over mine, "never argue with someone who is performing. Wait until the audience can see the stage." I had not understood him then. I understood him now. Claire was performing concern. Performing authority. Performing family. And I, foolish old Eleanor in her beige cardigan, had been cast as the problem. The double doors opened again, and a doctor stepped out, gray-haired, glasses low on his nose, scanning the waiting room. Claire straightened immediately. "Dr. Reynolds," Abigail said, walking toward him. Claire moved with her, fast enough that I almost missed the flicker of irritation on her face when she saw me stand too. I did not walk over. I only rose from my chair, holding Michael's sweater against my chest. Dr. Reynolds glanced from Claire to me, then back to the tablet in his hand. "We need to clarify the patient's emergency contact information," he said. Claire's mouth tightened. Mine did not move at all. For the first time that afternoon, the paper fence had a gap. Dr. Reynolds looked from Claire to me again, and for one small second the room held its breath. Claire stepped forward before he could speak further. "I am Michael's wife," she said, smooth and quick. "Any updates can come directly to me." Dr. Reynolds adjusted his glasses. "Of course. But the chart lists Eleanor Whitaker as the first emergency contact, followed by Robert Whitaker." My husband's name moved through the air like a hand reaching back from the past. Robert had been gone 5 years, but there he was, still standing beside me in black print on a hospital tablet, still refusing to let me disappear completely. Claire gave a small laugh that did not reach her eyes. "That must be old information. Robert passed away, and Michael has been married to me for 12 years. "I understand," the doctor said. "We still need accurate records. The system shows Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker as the primary contact connected to the supplemental care plan." Supplemental care plan. Claire went very still. I saw it. Abigail saw it too. The doctor did not seem to notice, or perhaps he was kind enough to pretend he did not. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, turning toward me, "are you Eleanor Whitaker?" I held Michael's sweater a little tighter. "Yes." Claire's head turned sharply. "Doctor, with respect, this is unnecessary. Michael is resting, and Eleanor has had a difficult time understanding boundaries lately." There it was again. The polished sentence. The careful poison. Dr. Reynolds remained professional. Medical boundaries are based on documentation, not family disagreements. He said it calmly, but the words changed the temperature of the room. Claire's face stayed composed, but her hand moved to the bracelet on her wrist and worried the edge of it with her thumb. I had seen her do that only twice before, once when Michael asked why their savings account was lower than expected, and once when Grace said she wanted to spend Christmas Eve at my house. Dr. Reynolds asked Abigail to verify the records. Claire stood beside him as if proximity could control the facts. I remained where I was because Robert had taught me that when truth is walking toward the table, you do not need to drag it by the arm. Abigail tapped through the tablet, her brow knitting slightly. It shows Whitaker Family Care Trust attached to the account, she said. Primary trustee, Eleanor Margaret Whitaker. The name sounded strange spoken aloud in that waiting room. Formal. Almost foreign. Claire looked at me then, not with sadness, not with shame, but with calculation. She had not known. That was clear. For years she had accepted the private room, the better insurance coverage, the rehabilitation benefits, the specialist access, all of it wrapped so neatly into Michael's adult life that she had never asked where the foundation was buried. She had assumed money appeared because people like Claire often mistake quiet generosity for weakness. Dr. Reynolds softened his voice. Mrs. Whitaker, your son is stable. He is tired, but responsive. We are monitoring him closely. There are no signs of serious complications at this time. My knees loosened so suddenly I had to press my hand against the back of the chair. Stable. Responsive. Words that gave a mother back her lungs. I nodded because if I spoke too soon, my voice might betray me. Claire stepped between us slightly. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to remind me of every doorway she had blocked with a smile. Thank you, doctor. I will explain everything to Eleanor later. Actually, he said, glancing at the tablet again, when Mr. Whitaker is ready for visitors, we will ask him directly whom he wants to see. Claire's mouth opened, then closed. I watched her lose 1 inch of ground. Only one. But after years of being moved 3 inches at a time, 1 inch felt like justice beginning to breathe. The doctor returned through the double doors, and Abigail followed, leaving Claire and me standing in a silence too clean to hide in. For the first time that day, she did not tell me to go home. She only looked at the sweater in my arms, then at my face, and I saw the question forming behind her eyes. What else does Eleanor still control? I did not answer it. I simply sat back down, placed Michael's sweater across my lap, and waited. I waited for 23 minutes after Dr. Reynolds disappeared behind the double doors. I counted them on the round clock above the vending machines because counting gave my mind a narrow road to walk on. Claire stayed near the nurse's station, pretending to scroll through her phone, but every few seconds her eyes lifted toward me. Not guilty. Not sorry. Measuring. That was what unsettled me most. She had been caught calling me a stranger in a place where my name was still printed into Michael's care, and she was not wondering how deeply she had hurt me. She was wondering how much damage the truth could do to her. My phone buzzed in my purse. For one wild second I thought it might be Michael, even though I knew better. It was Grace. Her message was only 5 words. Grandma, are you still there? I looked across the waiting room at Claire, then typed back, yes, sweetheart. Are you okay? The 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Then Grace wrote, Mom told me not to come. I stared at the screen until the words blurred slightly. Grace was 16, old enough to drive with a learner's permit, old enough to understand fear, but still young enough to believe adults should tell the truth during emergencies. Another message came through. She said Dad does not need drama. She said you already made things harder. I closed my eyes. There it was, passed down to the next generation like a family recipe no one should have kept. Drama. That was the word Claire used whenever love inconvenienced her. If I asked why Michael had not called in 3 weeks, I was creating drama. If I wanted Grace for a weekend, I was stirring up drama. If I noticed my birthday card came in signed, I was reading into things. I typed carefully. Your father is stable. Dr. Reynolds said he is responsive. There was a pause. Then Grace replied, Mom did not tell me that. I looked up just as Claire turned away from the desk and lowered her voice into another call. Her back was straight. Her tone was gentle. From a distance, she looked like a worried wife holding everything together. That was Claire's gift. She could look like the answer while quietly becoming the problem. My phone buzzed again. Grandma, there is something else. My stomach tightened before I read the next message. Mom has papers in her bag. She told Uncle Brandon she needs Dad to sign them before anyone starts asking questions. I read that sentence twice. Papers. Sign. Before anyone starts asking questions. The waiting room seemed to shrink around me. I could hear the coffee machine grinding beans. A child coughing softly. A nurse laughing somewhere down the hall. Ordinary sounds still happening while something ugly arranged itself in plain sight. I did not reply right away. I slipped the phone back into my purse and stood slowly, keeping Michael's sweater folded over my arm. Claire noticed immediately. "Where are you going?" she asked. Not concerned. Alert. "Outside," I said. "I need air." "Eleanor, this is not the time to wander around." I almost smiled at that. Wander. Another soft word meant to make me smaller. I walked past her without hurrying. The automatic doors opened to a covered entrance where rain tapped lightly against the pavement and ambulances sat under white lights. The May air was damp and cool, smelling of wet asphalt and cut grass from the hospital lawn. I stood beneath the awning and called Martin Hale, Robert's attorney, and the only man besides my husband who knew exactly how carefully our family's safety net had been built. He answered on the third ring. "Eleanor." His voice sharpened. "What happened?" I told him only the necessary pieces. Michael's accident. Claire blocking information. The hospital chart. Grace's message about papers. Martin did not interrupt. When I finished, he exhaled once, slowly. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "The Whitaker Family Care Trust still lists you as controlling trustee. Michael receives benefits through it, but Claire has no independent authority. None." Rain slid from the awning in thin silver lines. "Can she get him to change that?" I asked. "Not through hospital paperwork. And not while his capacity could be questioned after an accident. If she is trying to rush a signature, that is not concern. That is strategy." I looked through the glass doors. Claire stood inside, one hand in her oversized leather bag, speaking to someone I could not see. For years, I had mistaken silence for peace. That afternoon, under the hospital awning, I finally understood the difference. I came back through the automatic doors with rain on my sleeves and Martin Hale's words folded carefully inside me. Claire was no longer alone. Her brother Brandon had arrived, broad-shouldered and restless in a charcoal jacket, standing beside a woman I recognized as Claire's mother, Diane, whose silver bob and tight smile made her look permanently disappointed in the world. They had gathered near the quieter corner of the waiting room, just far enough from the nurse's station to seem private, just close enough for Claire to keep watch over the hallway. Claire saw me and stopped speaking. Brandon turned. Diane looked me up and down, not rudely enough to be called rude, only long enough to remind me she had never considered me part of her kind of family. "Eleanor," Claire said, too brightly. "There you are. We were just discussing what is best for Michael." I looked at the empty chair beside them. No one offered it. That was fine. I had spent enough years sitting where they placed me. "Were you?" I asked. Brandon cleared his throat. "Claire is under a lot of pressure. We all are. Maybe the best thing is to let her manage the medical side without extra emotional complications." Extra emotional complications. I almost admired the phrase. It sounded expensive, like something a consultant would say before removing the only person in the room who remembered the truth. Diane touched Claire's arm. "A wife has rights, Eleanor. I am sure you understand that." I did understand. I also understood that rights and control are not the same thing, though Claire had spent years treating them as if they were. "Michael can decide who he wants involved when he is ready," I said. Claire's face softened in that practiced way of hers. "That is exactly what I am trying to protect. He needs clarity." Not pressure from the past. The past. I had become the past now. Not his mother. Not Grace's grandmother. Not the woman whose name was tied to the care plan keeping the hospital doors open wider for him. The past. Claire reached into her leather bag and pulled out a slim folder. Navy blue. Gold clasp. Too prepared to be innocent. She held it against her chest when she noticed me looking. These are just routine forms, she said. I had not asked. That was how I knew Martin had been right. People reveal themselves most clearly when they answer questions no one has spoken. Brandon shifted his weight. Maybe you should head home, Eleanor. We can call you if anything changes. You mean if Claire allows it to change, I said. The words came out softly. Not sharp. Not loud. Soft enough that everyone had to lean toward them. Claire's eyes flashed. Only for a second. That is unfair. No, I said. Unfair was telling the nurse I was not family before you knew what my name still protected. Diane frowned. What is that supposed to mean? Claire's hand tightened around the folder. I looked at it, then at her. It means I spoke with Martin Hale. The color did not drain from Claire's face all at once. It left slowly, politely, as if even her fear had been trained to behave in public. Brandon looked from her to me. Who is Martin Hale? Robert's attorney, I said. My husband's name did what it had done earlier. It entered the room and rearranged the air. Claire recovered quickly, but not completely. I do not know why you would call a lawyer at a time like this. Because Grace told me about the papers. Silence. This one was different from the others. Not awkward. Exposed. Diane's hand slipped from Claire's arm. Brandon's jaw tightened. Claire looked toward the nurse's station, then back at me. Grace is a child. She misunderstood. Grace is 16, I said. Old enough to read a text message. Old enough to know when adults are whispering around the truth. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice. Do not bring my daughter into this. I met her eyes. You brought her into this when you taught her that love is drama and control is care. For once, Claire had no immediate answer. The folder remained pressed against her chest, but it looked heavier now. Abigail appeared at the end of the hall and called Claire's name. Mrs. Whitaker, Dr. Reynolds would like to review the visitation plan. Claire moved as if grateful for the interruption. I moved too. She stopped and turned. Eleanor, please. There was warning in her voice, but beneath it, something new. Fear. I picked up Michael's sweater from the chair where I had left it and walked beside her, not behind her. Before anyone decides what family means, I said, I think we should all hear the same information in the same room. Abigail led us into a small consultation room with frosted glass windows and 4 chairs around a round table. It was the kind of room hospitals use when conversations need walls. Dr. Reynolds stood near the counter with Michael's chart open on a tablet, his expression calm but tired in the way good doctors often look when families bring old storms into new emergencies. Claire entered first and placed her navy folder on the table, keeping one hand over it. Brandon and Diane followed, though neither of them seemed as certain as they had in the waiting area. I came in last, carrying Michael's sweater, and chose the chair closest to the door. Not because I planned to leave. Because I wanted to remember that I could. Dr. Reynolds began with the medical facts. Michael was awake. He was tired. He would need observation overnight and follow-up appointments after discharge, but the news was cautiously good. I listened to every word the way a mother listens when relief is too new to trust. Claire nodded at all the right moments, but her eyes kept sliding toward the folder. Finally, Dr. Reynolds said, before we discuss visitors, we need to correct the contact and decision-making information in the chart. Claire opened her mouth. I spoke before she could. Doctor, may I ask whether anyone has tried to change those records today? The room became very still. Claire's hand flattened over the folder. Dr. Reynolds looked at Abigail, then back to me. A request was made to update certain contact preferences, but nothing has been changed without the patient's direct confirmation. That is all I needed to know, I said. Claire laughed softly. This is getting ridiculous. Eleanor is turning routine paperwork into something dramatic. There was that word again. Dramatic. I set Michael's sweater on the table with care, smoothing one sleeve as if the cloth needed dignity too. No, Claire. What was private was my pain. You made my place in this family public. Brandon looked at his sister. What papers are in the folder? Claire's face tightened. Not now. Now seems exactly right, I said. I reached into my purse and took out the notes I had written while standing under the hospital awning, my handwriting uneven but clear enough. I did not have every document in front of me, but I had names, dates, and account references Martin had given me over the phone. The Whitaker Family Care Trust was created by my husband Robert before he passed. It pays for Michael's supplemental medical coverage. It helped cover Grace's specialist when she was little. It helped Michael keep his company insured during the downturn. It has also paid for more than one bill Claire allowed people to believe she and Michael handled alone. Diane's lips parted. Brandon stared at Claire. Claire's cheeks colored, but she stayed composed. That money was for Michael. Yes, I said. For Michael. Not for you to use as a stage while telling strangers I do not belong. Dr. Reynolds shifted slightly, uncomfortable but listening. Abigail stood near the door, tablet held against her chest, her eyes lowered in professional silence. I turned to the doctor. I am not asking you to break policy. I am asking you to follow it. Ask my son whom he wants contacted. Ask him whom he wants in the room. Ask him directly, without anyone answering for him. Claire leaned forward. He is exhausted. Then he can say that, I replied. But you will not say it for him anymore. The words surprised even me. They did not come out loud. They came out clean. For years, Claire had survived by filling silence faster than anyone else. She explained. She translated. She softened. She redirected. She handled. But in that small hospital room, her talent finally turned against her. Every explanation sounded like fear. Every soft word sounded rehearsed. Dr. Reynolds closed the tablet cover halfway. That is reasonable, he said. When Mr. Whitaker is ready, I will ask him directly. Claire looked at him as if he had betrayed her by staying neutral. Then she turned to me, and for the first time since I arrived, she dropped the sweetness. You have no idea what pressure I have been under. I looked at the woman who had spent years moving me out of photographs, holidays, phone calls, and now a hospital room. I know exactly what pressure looks like, I said. I carried this family quietly for decades. The difference is I never needed to erase anyone to feel important. No one spoke. Not Brandon. Not Diane. Not Claire. The folder remained closed on the table. For all its gold clasp and careful timing, it suddenly looked small. Then Abigail opened the door and stepped aside as Dr. Reynolds received a message on his tablet. He read it, looked up, and said, Michael is asking for his mother. Claire's face changed. Just a little. But enough. Enough for me to see the story she had built begin to crack down the center. Dr. Reynolds did not ask Claire to come with us. He looked at me, then at the sweater on the table, and said, Mrs. Whitaker, you can follow me. For 1 second, I did not move. After all that waiting, after all those years of being shifted aside with soft words and polite smiles, permission felt almost unfamiliar. Then I picked up Michael's sweater and walked past Claire without looking at her. The hallway beyond the double doors was quieter than the waiting room, all pale walls, rolling carts, low voices, and the steady rhythm of hospital life continuing as if nothing sacred had just been returned to me. Michael's room was halfway down the hall. The blinds were half closed, and afternoon light lay across the floor in thin white stripes. My son looked smaller in the bed than I remembered him, not weak exactly, but stripped of all the noise that usually surrounded his life. No phone in his hand. No business calls. No Claire speaking for him. Just Michael, with tired eyes and a hospital blanket pulled to his chest, looking at me like a boy who had lost his way home. "Mom," he said. One word. That was all. It broke something in me, but not loudly. I crossed the room and placed his old sweater on the chair beside the bed. "I brought this," I said. "I do not know why. I suppose mothers bring things." His eyes moved to the sweater, and his mouth trembled slightly. "I thought you did not come." I sat down slowly. "Who told you that?" He closed his eyes for a moment. Shame has a sound, even when no one speaks. It was in the way he breathed. "Claire said you were upset. She said you might not be able to handle seeing me like this." I looked at his hand resting on the blanket, the same hand that used to reach for mine crossing parking lots, the same hand that once held a crayon drawing of our house and wrote Mom in uneven letters above the door. "Michael," I said gently, "I drove 22 miles as soon as the hospital called." He turned his face away. "I should have known." I did not say yes. I did not say you should have. A mother can be honest without using every sharp tool available to her. "There are many things you should know," I said. "But not all of them need to be carried today." His eyes filled, though he did not cry. "Did Claire make a scene?" I looked toward the closed door. Behind it, I knew she was waiting, calculating what could still be repaired, what could still be explained. "No," I said. "She made a mistake." Michael looked back at me. "What kind of mistake?" I rested my hands in my lap, fingers curled around the edge of my purse. "She forgot that quiet women keep records too." He understood enough to look frightened. Not of me, but of the shape of what he had allowed. "Mom, I am sorry." The words were small. Late. Still, they were his. I accepted them with a nod, not because they fixed everything, but because I was too old to pretend apologies are useless just because they arrive damaged. "I will make sure your care is covered," I said. "The trust will continue paying for what you need to recover." "That was your father's wish, and mine." Relief crossed his face, followed quickly by confusion. "But Claire said the trust was just temporary." "Claire has said many things." He looked down. "What happens now?" I stood and smoothed the blanket near his arm the way I had when he was little, careful not to make him feel smaller than he already did. "Now you rest. Later, when you are well enough to hear the whole truth, you and I will talk without anyone translating my love into drama." He swallowed hard. "And Claire?" I picked up my purse. "Claire will no longer have access to anything Robert and I built unless it is directly for your medical care or Grace's well-being. Martin Hale is preparing the documents tonight." His face paled slightly, but he did not argue. That told me more than any confession could have. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. It was the first time I had done that in years. He closed his eyes, and for a moment I saw the child he had been before pride, marriage, money, and silence taught him to stand too far away. "I will always be your mother," I whispered. "But I will no longer beg to be recognized as one." When I stepped back into the hallway, Claire was standing near the wall with Brandon and Diane behind her. She searched my face for damage. I gave her none. Dr. Reynolds passed by, and Abigail offered me the smallest nod, professional but warm. I walked through the waiting room slowly, past the chairs where I had sat as a stranger, past the desk where my name had been questioned, past the sign that said family as if it were something other people could grant or take away. Outside, the rain had stopped. The pavement shone under the hospital lights. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cool May air, and realized I did not feel erased anymore. Claire had tried to make me invisible in front of strangers. Instead, she reminded me that I had been standing behind that family for so long, they had mistaken my support for absence. I walked to my car alone, but not lonely. There is a difference. One is emptiness. The other is peace with witnesses no longer required.